The first time Lin Shaw learned what family really meant, she was 8 years old, small enough that the dining table felt like a stage, and she was the forgotten prop pushed into the shadows. The house was loud that night, not the warm kind of loud, no laughter that wrapped around you like a blanket. It was the kind of loud that was made of sharp heels, clinking porcelain, and voices that sounded polite on the surface but carried knives underneath. From her spot near the hallway, Lin Shaw watched the chandelier light spill across the marble floor like spilled milk. She could see the dining room clearly. She could see her father, Lin Zhenheng, seated at the head of the table like a man who believed the world owed him obedience. She could see her mother, Madame Lin, whose name people said with respect and whose smile never reached her eyes. And she could see Lin Yufei, her older half-sister, sitting where the light was brightest, chin slightly lifted, already practiced in the art of being admired. Lin Shaw's stomach ached with hunger and hope. Madame Lin leaned toward Lin Zhenhong. "The teacher called again," she said softly. "Yufei is exceptional, top of her class." Lin Zhenhong's expression warmed instantly, as if the word exceptional was a flame that only lit for one child. "Of course she is." Lin Yufei smiled, small, humble, perfect. "I just studied a little more." "You don't need to be modest," Madame Lin cooed. "You were born different." Different. Lin Shaw heard that word the way a child hears thunder. Confused, frightened, but certain something dangerous was coming. She took one step forward, just enough that the light touched her toes. "Papa," she said, voice quiet, I got a star today too." The room fell into a brief silence, a pause like a door closing somewhere inside the house. Lin Zhenhong turned his head slightly, eyes moving to her as if she were an interruption, not a daughter. "A star?" Lin Shaw nodded quickly. She held up her notebook with both hands. The page was wrinkled because she had squeezed it too hard, terrified it would disappear. A gold sticker glinted on the paper. Madame Lin's gaze flicked over it. Her lips barely moved. "That's for handwriting, not achievement." Lin Shaw blinked. "But you're blocking the light," Lin Zhenhong said, tone flat. "Go wash your hands and eat after." After. After was a word Lin Shaw would learn like a curse. After Yufei finished, after guests left, after the photos, after the praise, after the love had been distributed. That night she ate cold rice in the kitchen while the dining room filled with warmth that was never meant for her. It should have been a small wound. Children are supposed to forget. But the Lin family had a gift: they could turn small wounds into lifelong scars with nothing but repetition. By the time Lin Shaw turned 16, she knew how to become invisible in a room full of people who shared her blood. She knew which floorboards squeaked in the hallway so she could avoid them. She knew how to swallow questions before they reached her tongue. She knew how to smile when someone praised her sister and used the praise as a weapon. Lin Yufei became the kind of girl adults adored. She was elegant, soft-spoken, charitable in public, effortlessly brilliant. She played piano like she was confessing secrets to the keys. She volunteered at fundraisers wearing white dresses that made her look like innocence itself. And she had a way of saying sister that sounded affectionate, until you noticed the way her eyes measured you like a flaw. Lin Shaw became the girl people forgot to notice. At school, teachers assumed she was average. At home, servants followed Madame Lin's silent rules. Serve Yufei first, always. If Lin Shaw asked for anything, they would hesitate the way people hesitate before stepping into mud. Even her father spoke to her like she was a distant employee. "What are your grades?" he asked, without looking up from the newspaper. Lin Shaw had been top of her class in math. She had wanted to say it. She had wanted to see pride in his eyes just once. But she looked at the newspaper and understood the truth. He wasn't asking because he cared. He was asking because he needed to know whether she might embarrass him. "Good," she said quietly. "Good enough," Madame Lin added, sipping tea. Don't compete with your sister. You'll only humiliate yourself. Lin Yufei didn't look up from her phone. She smiled like she was being merciful. Mom, don't say that. Shasha is trying. Trying. Lin Sha hated that word more than she hated after. That night, she locked herself in her room and stared at her reflection until it blurred. Her face wasn't ugly, she wasn't stupid, she wasn't worthless, but the way they treated her made her feel like she was made of something cheaper than everyone else. She pressed her palm against her chest and whispered to herself, "I'm real. I'm real." Somewhere inside the house, Lin Yufei laughed at something on her phone, bright, effortless laughter that didn't have to fight for space. Lin Sha lay on her bed and swallowed her tears like poison. And when she finally fell asleep, she dreamed of drowning. The year Lin Sha turned 18, the Lin family held a banquet that changed everything. It was supposed to be a celebration, Lin Yufei's acceptance into an elite graduate program overseas. The living room was transformed into a glamorous hall of glass and gold. Guests arrived in designer suits and dresses, their smiles sharp as polished knives. Cameras flashed. Compliments flowed like expensive wine. Lin Sha wore a simple black dress. She had bought it with her own savings, because Madame Lin had said, "Don't waste the family's money on you." She stood near the edge of the crowd, holding a glass she didn't drink from. She watched her father beam at Lin Yufei, like she was the only star in the sky. She watched Madame Lin hug Lin Yufei too tightly, as if claiming ownership. Then she noticed someone else. A man had just arrived, tall, calm, eyes steady in a way that made the room feel suddenly quieter. He wore a dark suit with the kind of subtle craftsmanship that didn't need logos. Older than Lin Sha by maybe 5 or 6 years. Handsome, but not in a bright, easy way. His attractiveness was the kind that came from restraint, like a blade kept in a sheath. People shifted around him. Some greeted him with nervous warmth. Lin Zhengheng practically rushed forward. Gu Shaiyan. So that was him. Gu Shaiyan was the heir of the Gu family. Old money, quiet power, and a reputation for being both ruthless and untouchable. The kind of man even Lin Zhengheng couldn't afford to offend. Lin Sha watched the way Lin Yufei's eyes lit up when she saw him. Of course. Lin Yufei moved toward him with perfect timing, her smile practiced. "Shaiyan, you came." Gu Shaiyan glanced at her. "Congratulations." His voice was low, polite, distant. Madame Lin's eyes gleamed like she had just seen the future she wanted. Lin Sha looked away. She told herself not to care. She told herself she was only a background character in this family's grand play. But then, Gu Shaiyan's gaze shifted. For a brief second, his eyes landed on Lin Sha. Not like everyone else's gaze, quick, dismissive. His was assessing, curious, like he had noticed a crack in a polished surface. Lin Sha's fingers tightened around her glass. She didn't know why, but her heart skipped the way it did when she was about to fall downstairs. Gu Shaiyan's eyes held hers for a moment too long. Then, Lin Yufei stepped slightly, blocking the view like a curtain closing. And Lin Sha was forgotten again. The betrayal didn't come as a scream. It came as a smile. A week after the banquet, Lin Sha was called into her father's study. She stood in front of Lin Zhengheng's desk while he flipped through papers. Madame Lin sat on the sofa like a judge. Lin Yufei leaned against the bookshelf, arms crossed, wearing a white blouse that made her look like innocence dressed for court. Lin Zhengheng finally spoke. "Sha, you'll be marrying." Lin Sha's throat went dry. "Marrying who?" Madame Lin's smile was soft. "A good family. A businessman named Zhao Wenhao. He's stable." Lin Sha had heard that name before. Zhao Wenhao was known for 2 things, wealth and cruelty. He was older, much older, a man with rumors around him like flies. Lin Sha's hands trembled. "Why would I?" Because, Lin Jianhong said, cutting her off, it will secure a partnership. Lin Sha stared at him, waiting for the punchline, waiting for someone to laugh and say it was a test, but no one laughed. Madame Lin's voice turned colder. Your sister is going abroad. She must remain untainted. Your marriage will distract the press. It will stabilize the Lin family image. Lin Sha's mouth opened, then closed. She understood suddenly. They weren't giving her away like a daughter. They were using her like a shield. She looked at Lin Yufei. You knew? Lin Yufei's eyes were calm. It's for the family. Lin Sha laughed once, a broken sound. For the family or for you? Lin Yufei's smile didn't change. Don't be dramatic. You're not being sacrificed. You're being assigned. Assigned. Like a chore, like a burden, like trash being moved out of sight. Lin Sha's vision blurred with heat. I won't do it. Lin Jianhong slammed the papers down. You will. Madame Lin stood slowly, heels clicking on the floor like a countdown. If you refuse, she said softly, we'll cut you off. No tuition, no shelter. You'll leave this house with nothing. Lin Sha's body went cold. Her father's eyes were hard. You owe us. We raised you. Lin Sha wanted to scream. You raised me like an afterthought. You fed me leftovers. You looked at me like a mistake. But she didn't scream, because she saw something in Lin Yufei's gaze, something gleaming beneath the surface sweetness. Satisfaction. Lin Sha swallowed, nails digging into her palms. You're doing this because you want to. Lin Yufei tilted her head. I don't understand what you mean. But she did. She absolutely did. And Lin Ya realized in that moment that the prettiest betrayals were always dressed like duty. That night, Lin Ya stood in her room and stared at the suitcase she had pulled from under her bed. She could run. She could leave. But where would she go? She had a small savings hidden in an envelope. It wouldn't last long. She had no allies, no one who would shelter her without asking for something in return. And her family had money, power, influence. They could hunt her down and drag her back like property. She sat on the edge of her bed and stared at her phone, thumb hovering over a contact she had saved weeks ago but never dared to use. Gu Shayan. She didn't know why she had his number. She had gotten it from a classmate who had interned with the Gu family's foundation. Lin Ya had told herself it was curiosity, a useless fantasy. But now her heartbeat thundered as if her body had decided for her. She typed a message. Mr. Gu, this is Lin Ya. I'm sorry to disturb you. I need help. She stared at the screen for a full minute before pressing send. The message went through. Then, silence. Lin Ya's breathing became shallow. Her thoughts raced. What was she expecting? A stranger to save her? A powerful man to interfere in a family matter? She almost laughed at herself. And then her phone buzzed. A single message. Where are you? Lin Ya's fingers shook. She typed her address. Another buzz. Stay in your room, don't open the door for anyone except me. Lin Ya stared at the words until they blurred. Her heart began to beat like it had remembered something. Hope, sharp and dangerous. But hope, in the Lin family, always came with a price. And Lin Ya didn't yet understand that asking Gu Shayan for help wasn't an escape. It was the first step into a storm. Gu Shayan arrived without drama. No sirens, no entourage spilling into the driveway like a parade. Just a single black car that rolled to a stop outside the Lin villa, as if it had always belonged there. The security cameras caught the angle of his shoulders when he stepped out. Straight, deliberate, like a man who didn't knock because the world had learned to open doors for him. Lin Ya heard the faintest sound from downstairs, voices shifting, servants moving with sudden urgency. Her door handle rattled once, someone trusting if it was locked. She didn't move. She sat on her bed with her phone clenched in both hands, staring at the screen like it was a lifeline and a blade at the same time. Then a message appeared. "I'm inside." Her pulse jumped. 3 minutes later, her doorbell rang. One crisp knock, then another. Not frantic, not pleading, commanding. Lin Sha stood and opened the door. Gu Xiaoyan was there. Up close, he looked even quieter than he had at the banquet, quiet like deep water. His face carried no obvious emotion, but his eyes were alert, taking in the tightness of her shoulders, the paleness of her lips, the way her fingers hovered as if she expected someone to snatch her back into the dark. Behind him, the hallway smelled faintly of expensive cologne and the Lin family's perfume, two worlds colliding. "Pack," he said. Lin Sha blinked. "What?" "I'm taking you out of here." Her throat tightened so sharply it felt like she had swallowed glass. You can do that?" He looked past her briefly, down the corridor to the staircase where distant voices were rising. "Yes." Something in that single syllable steadied her. Not comfort, something stronger. Certainty. Lin Sha grabbed the suitcase. Her hands moved too fast, like if she slowed down, fear would catch her. She shoved clothes in, then her notebooks, the envelope of savings, her ID, her phone charger. She hesitated at a small photo tucked inside her drawer. 8-year-old Lin Sha standing beside Lin Zhenheng, his hand on her shoulder as if she mattered. She stared at it for a long second. Then she left it behind. Gu Xiaoyan took the suitcase from her hand like it weighed nothing. "Don't bring anything you'd regret losing." Lin Sha followed him down the stairs. The living room was a theater of sudden rage. Lin Zhenheng stood near the sofa, face purple with outrage. Madame Lin sat upright, posture perfect, but her eyes were cold enough to freeze blood. Lin Yufei stood beside her mother like a shadow dressed in white. Their heads snapped toward Lin Sha, and then to Gu Xiaoyan. Lin Zhenheng's anger flickered into something else, panic wrapped in forced politeness. "Xiaoyan," he said, voice strained with an attempt at charm. What a surprise. Gu Xiaoyan didn't smile, he didn't bow, he didn't even bother with small talk. "I'm taking Lin Sha." Silence hit the room. Madame Lin's lips curled slightly, the way they did when she was about to correct a servant. "That's inappropriate." "Inappropriate," Lin Jianhong echoed quickly, like parroting the word would make it true. "This is a family matter." Gu Xiaoyan's gaze slid to Lin Sha for a brief second, just enough to confirm she was standing on her own feet, not collapsing. Then his eyes returned to her father. It became my matter when she asked me for help." Lin Jianhong's jaw tightened. "She's emotional. She doesn't understand." "She understands perfectly," Gu Xiaoyan cut in. His tone was still calm, but the air around his voice felt sharpened. "You're marrying her to Zhao Wenhua." Lin Jianhong stiffened. Madame Lin's eyes narrowed. "This is business. You wouldn't understand." Gu Xiaoyan's gaze settled on her like a weight. "I understand business better than you." The room's temperature dropped. Lin Yufei finally spoke, softly. "Xiaoyan, you must be mistaken. Xiaxia is impulsive. She exaggerates. My father and mother would never harm her." She said it in a way that sounded caring, like she was defending Lin Xia from her own hysteria. Lin Xia looked at Lin Yufei and felt something inside her split. Because Lin Yufei knew. Lin Yufei had watched Lin Xia drown for years and called it impulsive. Gu Xiaoyan's eyes shifted to Lin Yufei. "Would you marry Zhao Wenhao?" Lin Yufei's smile froze for a fraction of a second. "That's not relevant." "It's relevant," he said, "because the only reason Lin Xia is being sent is because you're too valuable to risk." Madame Lin stood abruptly. "How dare you speak to my daughter that way?" Gu Xiaoyan turned back to Lin Jianheng. "I'll make this simple." He opened a slim folder he had been carrying and placed it on the coffee table. With one motion, he slid it forward. Lin Jianheng hesitated, then opened it. His face changed as he read, color draining, eyes widening in ugly disbelief. Lin Xia caught a glimpse of the pages, printed documents, signatures, numbers, the kind of paper that could destroy a man's carefully built image. "What is this?" Lin Jianheng whispered. Gu Xiaoyan's voice remained level. "Evidence of your underreported income, your offshore transfers, the names of your shell companies, a list of contracts you secured through bribery." Lin Jianheng's hands shook. Madame Lin's expression finally cracked, shock, then fury. "You!" Gu Xiaoyan didn't even look at her. "If Lin Xia stays in this house, that folder goes to the authorities tomorrow morning." Lin Jianheng's throat moved. He swallowed hard, like swallowing pride, like swallowing poison. Lin Xia stared at Gu Xiaoyan, heart pounding so hard it hurt. He had done this, collected this, prepared this, not in the few minutes since she texted him, which meant he had been watching, waiting, maybe not for her, maybe for the right moment. Gu Xiaoyan looked at Lin Jianheng. "You'll tell Zhao Wenhao the deal is cancelled. You'll tell everyone Lin Xia is leaving for school abroad, or for an internship, or whatever lie keeps your pride intact, and you will not contact her." Lin Jianheng's eyes flicked to Lin Xia. Resentment, shame, rage. "She's my daughter." "You've never treated her like one," Gu Xiaoyan said, simple as truth. Lin Yufei's voice trembled slightly. "Xiaoyan, don't do this. It will hurt our family." "Our family, not my sister." Lin Xia's fingers curled, her nails cut into her palms. The pain grounded her. Madame Lin took a step forward, eyes like knives. "Lin Xia," she said, voice soft and poisonous, "if you walk out that door, you are no longer a Lin." Lin Xia looked at her mother, this woman who had worn silk and cruelty like a second skin. She remembered cold rice in the kitchen, remembered standing in the rain because she wasn't allowed into the car, remembered being told to smile and be grateful. Her voice came out steady, surprising even herself. "I was never a Lin in this house." Madame Lin's eyes flashed. Lin Jianheng's fist clenched. Lin Yufei's lips pressed into a thin line, her sweetness finally slipping. Gu Xiaoyan reached for Lin Xia's suitcase handle. "Let's go." Lin Xia took one last look at the living room where she had learned to shrink herself. Then she walked out. And for the first time in her life, the door closed behind her without her feeling like she had been locked out. This time, she had chosen. The car ride felt unreal. Lin Xia stared out the window as the city lights passed like blurred memories. Her chest was tight, not from fear now, but from the shock of escape, like she had been holding her breath for years and didn't know how to inhale. Gu Xiaoyan sat beside her in the back seat, phone in hand, sending messages. He spoke quietly to someone, arrangements, addresses, short commands, not one wasted word. Finally, he turned his head slightly. "Do you have anywhere safe?" Lin Xia swallowed. "No." "Then you'll stay at one of my properties." The word properties should have sounded arrogant, but from him it sounded like a fact. Lin Xia's voice was small. "Why are you helping me?" Gu Xiaoyan was silent for a beat. Then he said, "Because I hate waste." Lin Xia stiffened, misunderstanding, until he continued, "You're smart, you're disciplined, and you've survived a house designed to break you. That kind of resilience shouldn't be handed to Zhao Wenhao like a gift." Lin Xia's throat burned. No one had ever described her like that, not as a burden, not as a spare, as something worth protecting. "Also," he added, eyes forward, "I dislike your sister." Lin Xia let out a short, shocked laugh, half disbelief, half relief. "Why?" "She smiles too much," he said. "It's never honest." Lin Xia stared at his profile, the sharp line of his jaw, the calmness that felt like shelter. She should have been careful. She should have questioned everything. Men like Gu Xiaoyan didn't save girls like her for free, but exhaustion rolled over her like a wave. For tonight, she let herself believe in safety. The property he brought her to was not a mansion. It was a quiet apartment overlooking the river, modern and clean, with a guest room that smelled like fresh linen. Nothing was flashy. It was the kind of luxury that didn't need to prove itself. A woman in her 40s greeted them, sharp-eyed, kind-faced. "Miss Lin," she said warmly, bowing her head slightly. "I'm Auntie Chow. I manage this home." Gu Xiaoyan handed her Lin Shaw's suitcase. "She stays here. No visitors, no calls from the Lin family get through." Auntie Chow nodded immediately. "Understood." Lin Shaw stood in the doorway, suddenly unsure. Her feet felt rooted, like stepping inside meant admitting she had nowhere else to go. Gu Xiaoyan noticed, "You're safe here." The words sank into her like warm water. Safe. She almost cried right there. Instead, she bowed slightly, awkward. "Thank you." Gu Xiaoyan looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket and placed a new phone on the table. "Use this number from now on. Your old phone stays off." Lin Shaw blinked. "You're that serious?" He met her eyes. Zhao Wenhao doesn't like losing. A chill ran through her spine. What will he do? Gu Xiaoyan's voice was calm, but it carried something dark underneath. "He'll try to take back what he thinks is his, and your family will pretend they're innocent while they hand him clues." Lin Shaw's stomach twisted. Even now her blood could betray her. Gu Xiaoyan turned toward the door. "Sleep. Tomorrow we begin." Lin Shaw frowned. "Begin what?" Gu Xiaoyan paused, hand on the doorframe, and his voice lowered just slightly. "Your rebirth." Then he left. That night, Lin Shaw lay in the guest room with the city glowing outside like another world. She couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Madame Lin's expression, heard her father's cold voice, saw Lin Yaofi's perfect smile. She curled into herself and tried to breathe. Her mind kept returning to one terrifying question. What if they come for me? Then another, quieter question surfaced beneath it. What if this is the first time I'm allowed to become someone else? At some point near dawn, she finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, and she dreamed of fire. Not the kind that destroys, the kind that purifies. The next morning, Auntie Chow woke her gently. Breakfast was waiting. Warm congee, steamed buns, fruit. Real food served like Lin Shaw mattered. Auntie Chow watched her eat with a softness in her eyes. "You're very thin," she murmured. "Don't worry. Here no one will snatch food from your plate." Lin Shaw's throat tightened around a mouthful. At 10 o'clock, Gu Xiaoyan returned. He didn't ask how she slept. He didn't offer comfort. He handed her a folder. Inside was a schedule, a list of names, a plan. "You are going back to school," he said. Lin Shaw stared. "My tuition—" "I'll cover it, but that's not the point." His eyes were steady. "You'll graduate. You'll become financially independent. You'll learn how this world works, and you'll stop thinking survival is the same thing as living." Lin Shaw's fingers tightened on the folder. "And my family?" Gu Xiaoyan's voice was flat. "We'll handle them." The word "we" hit her harder than it should have. She swallowed. "Why do you sound like you've planned this for a long time?" Gu Xiaoyan's gaze didn't shift. "Because I have." Lin Shaw's breath caught. He continued, calm as ever. "Your father has been trying to partner with Zhao Wenhao for months. Your sister has been pushing it. The Gu family has been monitoring Zhao's illegal dealings. I was waiting for Lin Jianheng to make a mistake big enough to crush him." Lin Shaw's fingers went cold. "And I was the mistake?" "No," Gu Xiaoyan said. You were the line he crossed. Lin Sha stared at him, heart pounding. Gu Xiaoyan leaned slightly forward, voice lowering. Lin Sha, listen carefully. Your family will not stop. They don't lose gracefully. They will attack your reputation first, then your stability. If that fails, they'll attack your body. Lin Shao felt nauseous. Zhao Wenhao will attempt to force the marriage. If he can't, he'll attempt revenge. Your sister, Gu Xiaoyan's eyes sharpened, will pretend to be concerned while she feeds him information. Lin Shao whispered, What do I do? Gu Xiaoyan held her gaze like he was anchoring her. You become untouchable. Lin Sha's heart beat so loudly she could hear it. How? Gu Xiaoyan slid another sheet across the table. It was a contract. At the top, bold letters, engagement agreement. Lin Sha's vision blurred. What is this? Gu Xiaoyan's voice didn't soften. A shield. Lin Sha's hands shook. You want me to marry you? Engagement, not marriage. Lin Sha's mind spun. That's insane. It's strategy. Zhao Wenhao won't touch you if you're publicly tied to me. Your family won't dare force you if it means offending the Gu family. And the public, his eyes narrowed slightly, loves a scandal when it benefits the powerful. Lin Sha stared at the paper like it was a trap dressed as protection. She whispered, So I'm going from being traded by my family to being protected by you in exchange for what? Gu Xiaoyan's gaze was unreadable. In exchange for surviving. Lin Sha swallowed hard. And if I refuse? Gu Xiaoyan didn't threaten. He didn't raise his voice. He simply said, Then we'll use another method, but it won't be as clean. Lin Sha's throat burned. She looked down at the contract again. In one night, she had escaped one cage. Now someone was offering her a new one, golden, safer, but still a cage. Except this time, she might be able to reshape it from the inside. She lifted her eyes. If I do this, I won't be your pet. Gu Xiaoyan's lips curved faintly, almost not a smile, but something close. Good. Lin Sha's voice steadied. I'll do it, but on my conditions. Gu Xiaoyan leaned back slightly. Speak. Lin Xia took a breath. I stay in school. I keep my own goals. This engagement is public, but private life stays private. No controlling me, no treating me like property. Gu Xiaoyan nodded once. Agreed. Lin Xia's nails pressed into her palm. And one more thing. Gu Xiaoyan waited. Lin Xia's voice dropped into something colder. When the time comes, I want to be the one who ends them. A silence fell. Auntie Chow, standing in the doorway, looked startled. Gu Xiaoyan's eyes didn't flinch. He studied Lin Xia with the calmness of a man watching steel being forged. Then he said quietly, That's the first honest thing you've said since I met you. Lin Xia's throat tightened. Gu Xiaoyan pushed a pen toward her. Sign. Lin Xia stared at the line where her name would go. For a second, she saw her 8-year-old self holding up the notebook star, begging for a glance of love. Then she saw Madame Lin's smile, Lin Yufei's satisfaction, her father's cold command. She picked up the pen, and she signed. The ink dried fast, like a seal on a new identity. Gu Xiaoyan took the contract, folded it neatly, and stood. Good. Lin Xia exhaled shakily. What now? Gu Xiaoyan's eyes gleamed with something sharp. Now, he said, we announce it. The announcement went public at noon. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, it didn't need to be. A single photo appeared on the Gu Group's official platform, clean, elegant, impossible to misinterpret. Gu Xiaoyan stood in a tailored black suit, expression calm, one hand resting lightly at the small of Lin Xia's back. Lin Xia wore a simple ivory dress, no jewelry except a thin ring on her finger. Her posture was straight, her gaze steady, not shy, not smiling too much. The caption was brief. Engaged. Please respect our privacy. That was all. Within 5 minutes, the internet caught fire. Lin Chia watched the chaos unfold from the quiet of the apartment, her new phone vibrating endlessly on the table. Auntie Chow had turned on the television without sound. Headlines scrolled across the screen like accusations and awe blended together. Gu family heir engaged, mystery woman revealed. From Lin family, the forgotten daughter, Cinderella or calculator. Inside the most unexpected power engagement of the year. Lin Chia's chest felt tight, but not from fear alone, from visibility. For the first time in her life, people were looking at her, not past her. Gu Shayan stood by the window, phone to his ear, calmly extinguishing fires he had predicted would start. His voice was low, controlled.
Yes, that's correct. No interviews. Block that account, release the statement as written. He ended the call and turned to her. Your family has seen it? Lin Sha nodded slowly. How angry are they? Gu Shayan's lips curved faintly. Anger implies surprise. They're panicking. As if summoned by the word, Lin Sha's phone buzzed with a number she hadn't saved but knew by heart. Her father. She stared at the screen. Gu Shayan didn't tell her to ignore it. He simply said, your choice. Lin Sha's fingers hovered. Then, she declined the call. The phone rang again immediately. Declined. A message appeared. Lin Jianhong, come home, now. This is madness. Another message followed, this time from Madame Lin. Madame Lin, you have embarrassed us. Explain yourself. Then, Lin Yufei. Sha, are you okay? I'm worried about you. Call me. Lin Sha stared at her sister's name longer than the others. Concern. Worry. She almost laughed. Her fingers moved, slow and deliberate. She typed a single reply to Lin Yufei. I'm fine. Don't worry about me anymore. She turned the phone face down. Gu Shayan watched her quietly. Good. Lin Sha looked up. Good? You didn't explain. You didn't apologize. That's progress. Lin Sha exhaled. She hadn't realized how deeply apology had been carved into her reflexes. The Lin family's response came swiftly. By evening, rumors began to surface. Anonymous posts appeared online, screenshots, half-truths, carefully edited stories. Insider reveals Gu Heir's fiancé has a history of mental instability. Former classmate claims Lin Sha used underhanded methods to climb social ladder. Was the engagement forced? Sources say Lin Sha pursued Gu Shayan aggressively. Lin Sha read them in silence. Each line felt like being flayed, but she noticed something strange. She wasn't breaking. She felt anger, yes, hurt, disgust, but beneath it, something solid remained. Gu Shayan glanced at the screen. As expected.
That's it? Lin Sha asked quietly. They're trying to destroy me. He nodded. Reputation assassination, stage 1. And you're calm because, he said, this is the only battlefield where they think they still have power. Lin Sha swallowed. What do we do? Gu Shayan looked at her. We let them talk. Lin Sha stiffened. What? They want you emotional, defensive, crying publicly. His voice was steady. If you respond now, you validate them. Lin Sha's hands clenched. But they're lying. Yes, he agreed, and lies collapse faster when you don't hold them up. That night, Gu Group released a second statement. Cold, brief, surgical. We are aware of the false rumors circulating. Legal action has begun. No explanations, no apologies, no justifications. The internet shifted. Skepticism crept in. Screenshots were questioned, sources were challenged. People began digging, not into Lin Sha, but into who might benefit from dragging her name through the mud. And as the focus shifted, something else happened. Zhao Wenha made his move. It started with flowers. An enormous bouquet arrived at the apartment the next morning. Red roses, extravagant, suffocating. The card read, "Congratulations on your engagement. Some things don't change so easily." Lin Sha felt sick. Gu Xiaoyan read the card once, then handed it to Auntie Kyo. "Dispose of it." By afternoon, the calls started. Unknown numbers, foreign numbers, blocked IDs. One voicemail slipped through before the filter caught it. Zhao Wenha's voice was smooth, amused. "Shisha, you really surprised me. Playing hard to get? It only makes things more interesting." Lin Sha's hands trembled as she deleted it. That evening, Gu Xiaoyan returned earlier than usual. His expression was darker. "He went to your father." Lin Sha's heart dropped. And your father assured him the engagement is temporary." Something inside Lin Sha snapped. Temporary. She laughed, short, sharp, bitter. "Of course he did." Gu Xiaoyan's eyes sharpened. "Your family still thinks you are something that can be negotiated." Lin Sha looked up at him, rage and clarity colliding. "Then they haven't learned anything." Gu Xiaoyan studied her for a moment. "No, they haven't." That night, Lin Sha didn't sleep.
She sat at the desk in her room, staring at the city lights, replaying every slight, every humiliation, every moment she had been told to endure quietly. She realized something terrifying and liberating at the same time. She no longer wanted to just survive. She wanted justice. But not the messy kind that destroyed everything, including herself. She wanted precision. The next morning, she knocked on Gu Xiaoyan's steady door. He looked up. "You're awake early." "I need access," Lin Sha said. "To what?" "To everything you know about my family's finances, Zhao Wenhao's businesses, their connections." Gu Xiaoyan leaned back slowly. "That's not light reading." "I know," she said. "I'm not asking as your fiancé." He waited. "I'm asking as your partner." Silence stretched. Then Gu Xiaoyan stood, walked to a secure cabinet, and pulled out a thin drive. He placed it on the desk between them. "Once you open this," he said, "there's no going back." Lin Sha picked it up. "I already left," she replied. That day marked the true beginning of her rebirth, not as a victim rescued by a powerful man, but as a woman who chose to understand the world that had tried to crush her and learn how to dismantle it piece by piece. Weeks passed. The smear campaign failed. Public opinion stabilized. Some even began sympathizing with Lin Sha, the neglected Lin daughter narrative gaining traction as past stories resurfaced. Lin Sha returned to university quietly, escorted by Gu Group's security only when necessary. She dressed simply, spoke little, studied relentlessly. But behind the calm exterior, she worked. She learned how money moved, how shell companies hid sins, how influence was traded like currency. She saw her father's name appear again and again, attached to deals that should never have existed. She saw Zhao Wenhao's empire built on intimidation, coercion, and silence. And she saw Lin Yufei's fingerprints everywhere, emails, suggestions, introductions, always smiling, always clean. One night, Lin Sha closed her laptop and leaned back, exhausted. Gu Xiaoyan watched her. "You're changing." Lin Sha smiled faintly. "I'm remembering who I was, before they taught me to be small." He nodded once. "Good. But storms don't disappear because you prepare for them. They come anyway." And when Zhao Wenhao realized he couldn't touch Lin Sha directly, he decided to bleed her instead.
Zhao Wenhao's retaliation did not come loudly. It came quietly, like a hand closing around a throat while everyone else was distracted by noise. The first sign was subtle. Lin Sha noticed it one evening when she left the library later than usual. The streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement, and the air smelled faintly of rain. Her driver was 10 minutes late. That alone was not unusual. What unsettled her was the black sedan parked across the street. It had been there the night before, and the night before that. She told herself not to be paranoid. Old habits from growing up in the Lin house whispered that fear was weakness, that she was imagining threats because she wasn't used to attention. But when she slid into the car and glanced back through the window, the sedan's headlights turned on. It followed. Not closely, not obviously, professionally. Her chest tightened. She didn't say anything to the driver until they turned onto the main road and the sedan disappeared into traffic. That night, Gu Xiaoyan listened without interrupting as she described it. When she finished, he didn't reassure her. He stood, picked up his phone, and made 3 calls. The next morning, her security doubled. The day after that, her class schedule was changed. The day after that, a message appeared in her inbox from an unknown account. "You belong where I put you. Don't forget that." Lin Sha stared at the words until they burned into her memory. She didn't delete the message. She forwarded it to Gu Xiaoyan. His reply came immediately. "He's testing your limits." "So am I," she typed back before she could stop herself. There was a pause. Then, "Good, but don't confuse courage with recklessness." Zhao Wenhao escalated when intimidation failed. He started with money. A scholarship Lin Sha had applied for, one she was highly qualified for, was suddenly reallocated. A part-time research position vanished without explanation. A professor who had praised her work became distant, evasive. Patterns emerged. Every door that opened on its own merit was quietly closed from behind. Lin Sha felt the old, familiar suffocation creeping back in. The sense that no matter how hard she worked, someone else controlled the ceiling above her head. One evening, she sat alone in her room, fists clenched, nails biting into skin. "I won't go back," she whispered to the empty space. "I won't." She went to Gu Xiaoyan that night, not with fear, but with fury. "They're trying to starve me into submission," she said. "Make me desperate. Make me crawl." Gu Xiaoyan listened, eyes sharp. "Good," he said. She stared at him. "Good?" "Yes," he repeated calmly. "Because Zhao Wenhao is impatient, and impatient men make mistakes." Lin Sha's jaw tightened. "I'm not bait." "No," he said. "You're the reason he'll overreach." She studied him for a long moment. "You're letting this happen." "I'm allowing him to expose himself," Gu Xiaoyan corrected. "There's a difference." Lin Sha exhaled slowly. She understood now. This was war conducted in silence, and silence was where she had been trained to survive. The physical attack came on a rainy night. Lin Sha had insisted on attending a late seminar. Gu Xiaoyan argued. She stood her ground. "I won't shrink my life. That's what they want." He gave in, but added more security. It still wasn't enough. The parking garage was nearly empty when she reached it. Water dripped from concrete beams. The air was damp and cold. She heard footsteps. Too many. She turned. 3 men stepped out from behind a pillar. No masks, no hurry. One of them smiled. "Miss Lin," he said, "our boss wants to talk." Her heart slammed against her ribs. She backed away slowly. "I have security." The man laughed. "Not here." Her phone slipped from her fingers as one of them lunged. The world narrowed to chaos. Hands grabbing, her back slamming against concrete, the taste of blood in her mouth as she screamed. A fist connected with her ribs. Pain exploded. She fought. She kicked, she scratched. Years of suppressed rage poured out of her like fire. "Touch her again." The voice cut through the garage like a gunshot. Everything froze. Gu Xiaoyan stood at the entrance, rain-soaked, eyes black with something lethal. Behind him, armed security. The men bolted. One didn't make it far. Lin Sha slid to the ground, shaking, breath coming in broken gasps. Gu Xiaoyan was beside her instantly, hands steady as he checked her injuries. "Look at me," he said.
She tried. Her vision blurred.
"I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't listen."
His jaw clenched. "This isn't your fault." She laughed weakly.
"It always is, isn't it? That's what they taught me." Something in his eyes broke then.
"No," he said, voice low and fierce. "That lesson ends tonight." The hospital smelled like antiseptic and rain-soaked clothes. Lin Shao lay in the bed, bruised, bandaged, exhausted to the bone. When the adrenaline faded, the fear came. Not fear of pain, fear of how close she had come to disappearing without anyone knowing. Gu Xiaoyan sat beside her bed the entire night. At some point near dawn, she spoke without looking at him. "I was 8 when I realized my family wouldn't save me." He didn't interrupt. "I kept thinking if I was better, quieter, more useful, they would love me. But all it did was teach them I could be used." Her voice cracked. "I don't know how to stop being angry without becoming weak again." Gu Xiaoyan was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Anger isn't your enemy. Directionless anger is." She turned her head slowly. "What do you mean?" "You don't destroy yourself to prove you're strong," he said. "You build something they can't touch." Tears slid down her temples into the pillow. "I don't want to become like them." "You won't," he said firmly, "because you still care. They never did." That was when she cried. Not silently, not prettily. She cried like someone finally allowed to feel the weight she'd been carrying alone. The next betrayal came from the one person she had almost expected it from, but hoped, foolishly, might hesitate. Lin Yufei. While Lin Shao recovered, an exclusive article dropped online. Inside the Gu engagement, sources say Lin Shao is emotionally unstable. Attached were private details: her therapy sessions, her childhood struggles, her academic pressures, things only family could have known. Lin Shao stared at the screen, numb. Gu Xiaoyan read the article once. Then he stood. She crossed the line. Lin Shao's voice was hollow. She crossed it years ago. Gu Xiaoyan turned to her. "Do you want me to end this?" Lin Sha closed her eyes. She saw Lin Yufei's smile, Madame Lin's cold gaze, her father's silence. She opened her eyes again. "No," she said quietly. "I want to." Gu Xiaoyan studied her. This time, there was no hesitation. "Then we do it your way." Lin Sha recovered quickly, not because her body healed fast, but because something inside her had hardened into clarity. She returned to campus. She returned to public life. She smiled calmly in photos. And behind the scenes, she began to move. The evidence she had gathered was organized carefully, time-stamped, verified, impossible to dismiss. She didn't leak it. She waited. Because the most devastating truth is the one revealed at the moment the liar feels safest. That moment came at Lin Yufei's farewell gala. A grand event. Cameras everywhere. Donors, journalists, applause. Lin Yufei stood on stage in a pale blue gown, smiling graciously as she spoke about family values and gratitude.
Lin Sha watched from the audience. Her heart was steady. When Lin Yufei finished her speech, the host smiled. "We have a special video prepared tonight." Lin Yufei's smile faltered slightly. The screen behind her lit up. Emails appeared, audio recordings, financial transfers, messages between Lin Yufei and Zhao Wenhao, strategizing, mocking, plotting. The room erupted. Lin Yufei's face drained of color. She turned, wild-eyed, searching for someone, anyone. Her gaze landed on Lin Sha. Lin Sha stood. She walked toward the stage slowly, heels echoing in the sudden silence. "I spent my life thinking I was weak because my family told me I was." Lin Sha looked at Lin Yufei. "But weakness doesn't look like surviving years of cruelty without becoming cruel." Her gaze shifted to the crowd. "It looks like smiling while you destroy someone from behind." Security approached Lin Yufei. She screamed. Madame Lin fainted. Lin Jianhong collapsed into his chair, and Lin Sha stood there, heart pounding, not with triumph, but with release. The truth had spoken for her. Zhao Wenhao was arrested 3 days later. Lin Jianhong's empire crumbled soon after. Lin Yufei disappeared from public life. The storm ended not with applause, but with quiet. Months later, Lin Sha stood by the river again. This time, she wasn't afraid of shadows. Gu Shaoyan stood beside her. "You did it," he said. Lin Sha shook her head gently. "No, I survived it." She turned to him. "And now I get to choose who I become." He watched her, something softer in his eyes than ever before. "Then choose freely." Lin Sha smiled, not brightly, not for approval, but because for the first time in her life, the future felt like it belonged to her. Lesson learned: betrayal does not define you, favoritism does not decide your worth, and vengeance, when guided by truth instead of hatred, can become justice without costing you your soul. Years later, people would speak Lin Sha's name with a kind of careful respect. Not admiration loud enough to invite envy, not fear sharp enough to provoke challenge, just respect, the kind reserved for those who had walked through something terrible and emerged without begging the world to applaud them for it. She never corrected the rumors about herself. Some said she was cold now. Others said she had become ruthless. A few whispered that she was dangerous. Lin Sha knew the truth. She wasn't cold. She was calm. And calm, to people who thrived on chaos and control, felt like a threat. The river still flowed the same way it always had. Water didn't care who you used to be. On a quiet autumn afternoon, Lin Sha stood on the pedestrian bridge overlooking it, hands resting lightly on the railing. The wind lifted strands of her hair, carrying the faint scent of fallen leaves and distant rain. She wore no visible symbols of power, no extravagant jewelry, no excessive security, just a tailored coat, clean lines, steady posture. A woman who belonged to herself. Behind her, footsteps approached. She didn't turn immediately. "You walk too quietly," Lin Sha said. Gu Shaoyan stopped beside her. "You notice too much." She smiled faintly. "Old habit." They stood in silence, watching the water below. Their engagement had ended a year earlier. Publicly, it had been described as mutual, amicable, a natural conclusion to a strategic alliance. Privately, it had ended one quiet night over tea. No raised voices, no regret. Gu Shaoyan had looked at her across the table and said, "You don't need my shield anymore." Lin Sha had nodded, "And I don't want to live behind one." They hadn't broken, they had completed something. "Your meeting went well?" he asked now. "Yes," Lin Sha replied. "The board agreed. The foundation will expand into 3 more provinces." Gu Shaoyan nodded. "You're good at this." She corrected him gently. "I learned to be." A pause. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. She knew what he meant. The exposure, the destruction, the fact that her family name had become a cautionary tale. Lin Shaw considered the question honestly. "No," she said at last, "but I grieved it." Gu Xiaoyan looked at her. "I grieved the family I never had, the sister I wished existed, the parents I kept hoping would change." Her voice didn't shake. "That grief mattered," she said. "It kept me human." Gu Xiaoyan studied her profile, the way the light caught her eyes. "You didn't let bitterness win," he said. Lin Shaw smiled softly. "I almost did." She saw her mother once more. It wasn't planned. It happened in a hospital corridor that smelled of disinfectant and old regret. Madame Lin looked smaller than Lin Shaw remembered. Age had stripped away the sharp elegance, leaving behind a woman whose spine still tried to hold pride upright, even as her body failed her. Their eyes met. For a moment, the past crowded the space between them: cold kitchens, sharp words, deliberate neglect. Madame Lin's lips trembled. "You look well," she said. Lin Shaw nodded. "I am." Silence. Then quietly, Madame Lin said, "You ruined us." Lin Shaw didn't flinch. "No, you ruined yourselves. I just stopped protecting the lie." Madame Lin's eyes filled, not with tears of remorse, but with something closer to confusion. The foundation Lin Xia built focused on children from households where favoritism had been disguised as discipline. She didn't advertise it loudly. She didn't tell donors sob stories. She simply made sure children had access to education, therapy, and, most importantly, choice. One afternoon, a teenage girl sat across from her during a mentorship session. The girl's hands twisted in her sleeves. "My family says I'm selfish for wanting more." Lin Xia leaned forward slightly. "Wanting more than what?" "More than what they decided I deserve." Lin Xia smiled, not sadly, but warmly. "Then let me tell you something," she said. "People who benefit from your silence will always call your voice selfish." The girl's eyes filled with tears. Lin Xia handed her a tissue. "You're not wrong," she said gently. "You're early." Sometimes Lin Xia still dreamed of the old house, but the dreams had changed. She no longer stood in the kitchen eating cold rice. She walked through the rooms calmly, touching walls that no longer frightened her. And when she reached the front door, it was always open. She always left. On the anniversary of the gala, the night everything shattered and reformed, Lin Xia returned to the river alone. She stood there as dusk settled, the sky bruised purple and gold. She thought of the girl she had been, 8 years old, holding a notebook star, 16, shrinking herself to survive, 18, being traded like a bargaining chip. She closed her eyes and breathed. "I didn't save you," she whispered into the wind. "I carried you." The river flowed on. Indifferent. Enduring. And Lin Shaw turned away from it, not running, not escaping, but walking forward, steady and unafraid.